as a myth of therapy is that you have to have these big, crazy issues to go to therapy, or, you know, a disaster needs to happen in your life for you to step foot in a therapist's office, when really it's quite the opposite. It can be so much more preventative if you go before those big traumatic events happen in your life. And so it's actually a lot more about gaining that self-awareness and kind of getting the tools that you need to thrive as you continue on with whatever environment that you're in. And so I think it's definitely not one of those things where you need to have a certain level of, you know, big issues in your life. Like anybody can go to therapy, and I think everyone could benefit from it.
Everybody needs therapy. That might be a tough pill to swallow. However, it's something we're beginning to hear everywhere that we go, but we're definitely not exercising it. So, psych student Micaela Stegeman will be joining us and breaking down why that is. She'll also be sharing with us what exactly goes on behind a therapist's chair, and we'll be getting top-class counsel from her on how to maintain a healthy work-life balance and the importance of mental health. I hope you guys enjoy today's take on the P word. Today on the P word, we have Micaela Stegeman from Tyndale University joining us. Thanks for being here today, Mick.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, where have you gone to school? What are you studying?
Yes. So I'm currently at Tyndale University doing my master's in clinical counseling. So that's a 3-year program, and I'm in my last year right now. And then prior to being at Tyndale for my master's, I was at University of Guelph-Humber and I did my Bachelor of Applied Science in Psychology. So that was a 4-year degree program, and then went right into my master's.
Did you do any co-op at Humber?
Yes. So through the Guelph-Humber Psychology program, there is like a mandatory placement that you do. So that was in, I think, 3rd or 4th year that you have to do a placement. So you can choose between like private practice, doing it at a hospital, school setting. So I did mine at a private practice. Jail, whatever, whatever you want to do. So I did mine at a private practice in my undergraduate placement program.
Yeah, okay. And then how did you decide that out of all of them you want to do the private practice, not potentially in a prison or hospital?
To be honest, I had initially wanted to do it in a prison because that's something that's just always fascinated me. I've just always like had a thing for criminals, like the story behind why they do what they do, all that kind of stuff. So that initially was my main interest. But for doing a placement in the prison system, it is a little bit more difficult as there's not many options out there. You know, it's a lot more structured of a thing to kind of get into. So that didn't end up working out. So then I ended up going through with the private practice, which was kind of another area of interest of mine. And so far I've been really loving it and I've learned a lot. Yeah.
I definitely, I see that the barrier of entry to getting to something like a prison, especially being a co-op student, it would be much more difficult. But I don't think it's as bizarre as people make it seem, because just like a fun fact, on Netflix, one of the most watched genres is literally like true crime, like serial killer items, like the Jeffrey Dahmer
I'm literally watching it right now.
That series is like, I don't know how many people, it was millions, like 100 million viewers, I think, something like that. And it was like almost concerning, the amount of people that were I watched the trailer and I was like, this is disturbing, you know? And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I want to watch it or if I never want to see this on my screen, you know? But I feel like people are very, very like captivated by that. So obviously getting into the mind of people with those, you know, backgrounds is something that you don't have the opportunity to do every day. So especially in your field, I would not like think twice and be like, okay, send me to prison, but not actually. So
I mean, that's the first place I wanted to go. I feel like ever since I watched Criminal Minds when I was younger, or like shows like The Mentalist, where it's kind of that like profiler atmosphere, that's always like intrigued me so much. So I've always had a thing for that. So who knows where the future will lead me?
You never know.
I'm still open to it.
Yeah, we'll see what the future brings. But in terms of the past, can you tell us how you decided on this career path?
So kind of in line with what we were just talking about, I initially, when I was in high school, I actually wanted to get into something within like the criminal justice system. Like I said, I got inspired by those Criminal Minds shows, those Mentalist kind of shows. And so I was always really fascinated about criminals and, you know, just kind of what drives them to commit those crimes. And so I had kind of initially started thinking about criminology. What could I do with that? And then it kind of, I guess, just morphed from criminology into psychology, because I had, you know, people in high school always tell me, you know, you're so observant or different things like that. And so I knew I had certain strengths that would maybe help in regards to like pursuing a career in psychology. So it just kind of morphed from wanting to do something with criminology into psychology. Yes. Because the two worlds really like interconnect. So
they definitely do.
That's kind of how I started getting on that path.
Yeah. And I think just even considering criminology, like the path that you have to take for in school, it's of course, you know, universities, formal education, but the courses you take are quite different from psychology, and at least psychology, it just depends on whether it adheres to your interests. And I think that's a great like learning point. We can't always decide when we're 18, but luckily for you, it worked, right? Yeah. And you were talking about your strengths. What do you think, like, person going into the field of psychology, what are some of the strengths they should have?
Well, kind of the first couple things that come to my mind is, you know, the field of psychology. Well, the field of psychology is very broad, so there's definitely multiple different avenues that you can go down, which require different strengths from the people doing those jobs. But for myself specifically, pursuing clinical counseling to be a registered psychotherapist in the future, to kind of go down that road, I think the most important thing is probably having empathy. And, you know, that's sometimes easier said than done, but I think you need that empathy when you're interacting with clients from all different walks of life, with all different sets of, you know, presenting problems and different things like that. And so that's definitely the number one thing that comes to mind. Second thing that I think is that you also have to be self-aware to kind of pursue psychology, especially if you want to become a therapist. Because, you know, as I've learned a lot throughout my master's, is that, you know, an unself-aware therapist is only going to do harm to the clients. And so really having that time of self-reflection for yourself as you're going through these programs is really important. And I think to really develop that skill within yourself of that self-reflection and just self-awareness about, you know, your own biases and your own beliefs about things, it's really important to kind of look into that before you start seeing clients. Yeah.
But do you ever think that, for example, like in this thing that we call life, at the end of the day, you're consistently learning about yourself, right? So even as you do face different clients, you're going to come from all different walks of life themselves. Don't you think that sometimes even they'll get you to question certain things? But I understand, you know, you leave things at the door. So it's like having a good you try to. You should. Yeah. Right? But you should ideally have that foundation of like who you are and what you're trying to do, and having your own personal mission like in mind before you can really like help other people help find their personal mission.
I think that's definitely smart to kind of have that sense of identity within yourself before you're going into a counseling session with somebody. Like you said, everybody you're meeting with and providing therapy for, they have their own ideas of what is right and wrong, their own ideas 100%. Of, you know, how to live life and what is life's meaning and different things like that. And, you know, everyone's unique, so you're never going to align completely with a client sitting in front of you. So it's really important to be aware of kind of what your own beliefs are, so you can kind of better keep that in check while you're in that therapy session and not put your own ideas onto the client.
I agree. And it's also like, I don't know if you've ever watched The Sopranos, but even in that show, it like right from the first episode, it's sorry, spoilers for anybody, but basically Tony Soprano, who's like the head of the mafia, like of his family at this point, he realizes he has a lot of mental health issues, but there's a big stigma around it because it takes place early 2000s, 90s-ish. Yeah. And he's like, okay, I need therapy because I keep having like breakdowns. I think it's like anxiety and
I think it was anxiety.
Yeah. So then afterwards they recommend to a therapist, but he has to go like super incognito. He ends up there. Okay, cool. The therapist knows who he is. Like she low-key knows what he does, but she's like, I'm gonna leave my biases at the door. Yeah. And throughout the entire show, it's basically just like her consistently. I like remember examining this in more detail when I watched it. I watched this like 6 years ago, but she's consistently trying to prove, like, I think that there's no such thing as like right or wrong in a person, and at the end of the day, people are consistently like, you know, her other co-psychologists are telling her more or less along the lines of like, he is a murderer, he's a gangster, like he's no good, and she's consistently defending him like in personal settings. And I'm like like, you don't have to do that. But at the end of the day, it even got her to question a lot of things throughout the show. And you see that a lot in the way their relationship developed.
Yeah, when that kind of makes me think, you know, currently in my master's program, I am like taking on pro bono clients. So I've started to have my own experiences with clients, and something that I've learned throughout my short time doing that even is that, you know, as you start to hear about people's lives in such depth and to understand it from really start to, you know, current times, like understanding their whole history and just their whole kind of lifespan. When you understand that fully and when you hear from them their own personal experiences, what they went through, it is really hard to judge a person because you have such a deeper level of understanding of who they are, why they do what they do. And so for myself, it's been really humbling actually to like have those experiences with clients where they're so vulnerable and they're telling me, you know, everything that's gone on in their lives. And so when I, kind of similar to what you said with Sopranos, is like she was defending him and you wouldn't think like, as an outsider, you think, why is she defending him? But like when you hear someone talk about their life in such like a raw, open, honest way, you just really get a lot of compassion for them sharing, and it just is really humbling because you have that kind of like, oh, okay, like it kind of makes sense. And so you just understand things from a lot deeper than maybe like the average person or like you speaking with a friend even.
100%. Yeah, I think everyone could do with a couple episodes of Sopranos if you can sit through it. It's really long, but I literally think it's one of HBO's best shows ever. Don't even get me started on like the House of the Dragon.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna go
we're
there.
Not
but
getting there today.
That's a whole other thing. But you know, now I'm gonna ask you, like, what do you think is one of the biggest myths in your field?
I feel like there's a lot of myths. One that comes to mind is that people think it's like the client is just laying back on the bed while they're just like talking and the therapist is just like,
tell me more, writing it down. Yeah.
And while there is some like venting involved or a lot of active listening as the therapist, you know, it's so much more than that. Like it's not just talking with someone. And so like I think also a lot of people may think, you know, therapy is just someone giving you advice or something like that, when, you know, as you're in your master's, you learn that speaking with someone, therapist to client, is a lot different than how you would speak to someone as a friend. And so, you know, there's modalities that inform how you interact with a client. So depending on whatever modality that the therapist subscribes to, that's going to influence, you know, the techniques that you use, the interventions that you do. And so it's a lot more than just talking and offering a helping hand. And, you know, at the end of the day, as therapists, we want our clients to kind of come to the realizations themselves and make their own decisions and empower them to do that rather than us just, you know, giving them a magical answer, which doesn't exist. So I would say those are two really big myths surrounding therapy.
Yeah, ideally it's just going to be a strategic conversation for the self-realization, which is not easy at all. I think that the more life experience you have, you realize that, you know, your parents are right, but at the end of the day, like, they can tell you something when you're young, but until you experience it, and I'm not saying go actively experience it just to prove them wrong or not. No, but once you do go through more things, it's something that, like, you realize, you know what, this is valuable, and I've been listening to it my entire life. But you do have to go through it to really understand it. And I don't think people really understand that with therapy. It's something that, like, I can't do this on my own, and I need someone to guide the way. And there's only so many unbiased people one can have in their life, right? So I think everybody could use a little bit of therapy at the end of the day. I think so too. Right?
Yeah, I'm such a believer in that. And I think kind of that brings me to another point. I think as a myth of therapy is that you have to have these big, crazy issues to go to therapy, or, you know, a disaster needs to happen in your life for you to step foot in a therapist's office, when really it's quite the opposite. It can be so much more preventative if you go before those big traumatic events happen in your life. And so it's actually a lot more about gaining that self-awareness and kind of getting the tools that you need to thrive as you continue on with whatever environment that you're in. And so I think it's definitely not one of those things where you need to have a certain level of, you know, big issues in your life. Like anybody can go to therapy, and I think everyone could benefit from it.
And especially because therapy is a treatment at the end of the day, and like you're saying, is preventative. And I think it could help us just process things a lot better and have that self-awareness that maybe as an individual, you're not at that point yet to have, like, by yourself, right? So by whatever circumstances you end up there, I think a little bit of therapy never hurt anybody. So
I agree.
So, like, how do you think your parents describe what you do?
Well, I think at this point, since we've been in it for a while now, I think I've kind of drilled on them, like, what it actually is and kind of squashed any misconceptions that there was. I mean, I think for the most part, they have a good understanding about what it is, but I think just generation to generation, there is still some of that, like, traditional mindset that they may still carry with them, kind of, you know, maybe holding some more stigmas around therapy or viewing therapy as something that you kind of, it's a hush-hush kind of thing. You don't speak about it. You don't share. It's more of that kind of mentality of, like, you know, we keep our emotions private and we don't talk about those kind of things. So there is kind of that, kind of like that belief that I've noticed in them that I've had to kind of, like, really, I guess, just talk about it and normalize it a lot more because, I mean, to me at this point, with it being my job, I'm like, therapy is so normal. Like, it's not anything to be ashamed of or anything like that. And so it's really just, like, I guess, approaching it from a really open-minded perspective, and I think it's, like, rubbed off on them over time.
Especially because now they have to see you as a professional, not just as your daughter. Of course, you've gone through all this education, you know. I mean, I'm sure they help pay for some of it, so at this point, they're like, okay, I better be getting my money's worth, you know. So they have those into you to a certain extent.
I'm like, hello, I'm the one in psychology here, the study of the mind.
Exactly.
Listen to me.
And it's like, I feel, even with my own experience with my parents, right? Obviously, there was, like, a certain belief around, like, mental illness and, like, mental health and being able to seek those treatments. And they're, like, they're very for in terms of, like, for the children. But if I tell them, you guys need therapy, they'll be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is a generational thing or if it's just you guys as individuals. But,
I know.
Yeah, it's, like, interesting, especially getting your parents' perspective on things and the intergenerational, like, societal views that they have. It's certainly very different, you know?
It's so, so different. And I think even just, like, as time goes on, we're always, like, evolving, and, like, our perspectives as, like, a society and as a culture are always changing. And, like, I can definitely, even if I look at, like, my own timeline being, like, in the psychology realm, like, starting my undergrad versus now, it seems like even with social media and all those kind of things, like, therapy has even gotten a lot more normalized since when I started, not even, like, 10 years ago, less than 10 years I've been in, like, psychology. So it's interesting what, like, social media can do for good with therapy, of, like, really normalizing it and just kind of, you know, showing how a lot of people go to therapy and it's really not that big of a deal, not something to be ashamed about.
100%.
Versus, you know, even when I started, it was a lot, I think, still a little bit more, like, we don't share that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I remember I'd been reading, like, this is, like, from over 100 years ago, and it was not the current king, not the current queen, but the one before that, like, you know, I believe it was King Henry. One of his siblings had a sibling. He was born with, I believe, like, he was epileptic.
Okay.
They obviously didn't have treatment for it, so they kind of kept him very shut away. And it was for his, like, own good, they say. Some people believe it was neglect. Either way, what you want to say, but they didn't understand how to treat it.
Right.
So sadly, he died very young, and he was very kind of, like, not, I would say, like, exposed to a lot of things, but again, it's because society can be so cruel.
Right.
Right? And at the end of the day, I'm very happy that we're in the position that we're in, especially after something like COVID that happened. It was something that people realized, like, mental health is now a real thing. We are experiencing this, being shut in our homes, being shut away from people that we love, especially people that didn't, like, have others to go through the pandemic with, or if you were going through the pandemic with a whole family, like, that's just rough. Those are struggles for everybody. So we were all exposed to it, and I think it definitely helped that, you know, destigmatize the whole thing. Yeah,
and I think even, like you were saying with COVID, luckily we did have some of that, like, culture was going in a way of kind of normalizing it a little bit more, but I think still to this day there's still kind of this stigma around, you know, mental health versus, like, physical health, and, you know, just the comparison between the two of what's legitimate and what's not. And I think, you know, of my parents' generation, or, you know, and that can linger down into our generation as well.
Intergenerational trauma.
Yeah,
that's real.
That can linger down.
That's so real.
So, like, we don't realize, like, maybe our own subconscious beliefs that we have about therapy, but, you know, obviously I always think about how if someone breaks their leg, you know, that will be taken seriously. You're going to go get help from the doctor because you have a broken leg. But then, you know, with mental health, since you can't necessarily see it, there's kind of that stigma around that. Is it, you know, does it have the same legitimacy as, like, a broken bone, let's say? But, you know, as we're, I think, continuing on in society and as culture is like evolving, you know, we're realizing more and more and more that like our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, all of that combined is so interconnected, and 100%. It's so important. And if you neglect one, you know, the other areas will show that as well.
Yeah,
and
it
so
tips the scale.
You can't really like separate one from the other, I find.
Yeah. And like while we're on the topic of stigmas, I just wanted to like move forward with the topic of women and women empowerment. And like, do you find that in psychology, male or female dominated?
Female for sure.
100%. Like even like the American Psychology Association, they had released this one study from, I think it was like 1985, 86. And they observed afterwards the amount of men in the field from, I think, like the 70s to 2008 that received PhDs, and it declined from 70% being men to now 30%.
Wow.
Yeah, like, do you think there's a specific reason for that, though?
To be honest, I think it's probably a mixture of factors. I think especially from the time that study was published, you know, it's also a time as, you know, the study's continuing to be published, you know, it's more accepted for women to join the workforce. And so there's just like more an influx of women coming onto the scene when maybe prior to that it wasn't as normalized or as accessible for women to join. And so I think there's multiple different factors as well as, you know, for myself, just speaking from my own experience, in my undergraduate degree, 97% were probably female. There was probably 2 guys in my program. And so definitely very female dominated. My master's program is a little bit more of a mix.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's still some stigmas around, maybe with culture currently, there's still some stigmas around maybe the field of psychology and kind of, you know, diving into other people's emotions and feelings and stuff like that. It's not seen as, I guess, a manly or a male, you know, dominant field because of kind of the stigmas around that, of men speaking about their own mental health and just their feelings in general.
And
you know, it can be like not promoted within families as well. It's like that's a female thing. It's like females 100%. Talk about their emotions.
If a guy talks about it, that makes him sensitive. That makes him less reliable. Like, there's a lot of stigmas within different cultures, and I can attest to that about a guy being able to open up like that. But I've seen it firsthand as well. And if as a male, like, you're not able to talk about your own emotions, like,
you can't.
It comes
you won't
out
feel comfortable talking about others. Then.
Exactly, and it can come off at times like you can deflect, or it can come off negatively, or you can just hold so much in. And I feel like I hope that's another kind of barrier that we see break down within the couple of years to come, because I frankly, if I have a son, I don't want him to like not feel safe to not talk about like you know his emotions, especially with like people that care about him. And at the end of the day, I hope there's like a process hopefully like in place to be able to break that down slowly, make it more acceptable for men to be able to do that.
I hope so, because you know, I think at the end of the day, it's definitely healthy for everybody to be able to speak about their emotions. And, you know, once that becomes more accepted within, you know, different cultures, within your own family, it creates like a ripple effect for future generations, for other guys within friend groups, different things like that. And it doesn't become kind of something that you look down upon for a guy for speaking about his feelings or wanting to pursue psychology. And there isn't that kind of, I guess, stigma surrounding that, because I just think to myself, like, if a guy were to say, like, you know, I'm going to pursue psychology versus business, I feel like for the most part it seems like, at least within my own family, I don't have brothers, but I feel like if I did have a brother, you know, my dad would probably praise him more if he were to pursue like a business degree.
Your father's in business, correct? Right? So.
Or a finance degree, because it seems more stereotypically like male. And so
a finance bro.
I wonder.
Financial district downtown, exactly.
So I mean, I don't have brothers, but I just feel like that could be, you know, more accepted than pursuing something like psychology.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, hopefully as time goes on, it becomes like more integrated between men and women, because I think having men and women in a field, in any field, is a positive thing to 100%. Kind of have that balance.
Yeah, I agree. And like, kind of like we're supporting men in the aspect in the field. How do you think women can continue to support other women in your field?
I mean, I think, you know, in any field, for the most part, just like being that sense of encouragement, but being there for people, answering the questions that they may have. You know, within psychology, there's so many different ways that you can go. And for myself, I just try to help people in the way that I can with, you know, the experience that I've gone through, help them kind of answer those questions, because there's a lot of steps to kind of get through your undergrad. Are you going to do like the GRE test or not? Are you going to, which masters are you going to go to? Are you going to pursue a PhD? No, I don't know. Like there's so many different obstacles that it can be super confusing. And so I think having like women in your corner to kind of guide you through is really important. And I think just, you know, having those, even those networking connections within psychology, like the field in general, can be really helpful.
100%.
Like, I found that my undergraduate placement at the private practice, there's women therapists there that I've met that I still keep in contact with now. And it's been so helpful, and I think just overall uplifting for me to almost look at them and think, okay, I can get there one day. There's a lot of steps, but you know, you've made it, and hopefully I will too. So to have them as networking connection, as well as just almost kind of that relational connection, and it kind of helps you remain hopeful when there's a lot of steps.
I can imagine. Definitely. I mean, 4 years of undergrad, now 3 years in a master's, and then afterwards, like, you have to think about what you're going to do next. And it's like, you're still not, like, you're getting there, you see the progress, but it's not like instant gratification, you know? And I feel like, again, another good, like, trait for anybody in this, like, area of study is, like, you have to be a person that's in it for, like, the long-term growth, that's in it for, like, the long-term rewards, right? It's not something that's going to happen overnight at all. No. So, yeah, definitely making sure that you know that yourself is something, like, I feel like everyone should keep in mind. Yeah,
like, kind of questioning, you know, why are you pursuing psychology? What's your motivation behind it? Is there that kind of internal motivation, or is it like an external thing? Because I think if you really are passionate about psychology, you know, like I am, it can be hard, obviously. There's times when it's just so exhausting and it's so much all on your plate. But I think, you know, when it comes down to it, I really am passionate about psychology and clinical counseling, and so it makes it all worth it. So, you know, I have that sense of purpose that's pushing me even when I don't want to do it. So I think, you know, asking yourself, like, why are you going into psychology? What's kind of your mission with that? What do you want to get out of it, or how do you want to change maybe or help evolve the psychology realm? Like, there's so many possibilities, and so I think it's important to kind of just like remind people of that.
And speaking about like the possibilities in psychology, like for all the young men and women out there that want to go into psychology but also kind of make a business, like have business ventures out of it as well, what would you recommend?
Well, I think, you know, like I said, there's so many different avenues with psychology, but thinking of clinical counseling and seeing clients and stuff like that, there's, you know, the business side of things of starting your own practice, which definitely kind of requires some entrepreneurial skills. You know, having volunteered and now interning at a private practice, I kind of have seen the behind the scenes, and it is a lot of work. It's a business at the end of the day. And so that's definitely a route that people can go. They can open up their own private practice or join a private practice with other clinicians, kind of like even a more holistic practice with, I don't know, like acupuncturists, massage therapists, like, you know, a more integrated team. So there's that possibility. But then also in today's day and age with like social media, there's so many different like routes that you can take with that. You know, within psychology, even within being a registered psychotherapist, there's so many different specializations like anxiety, depression, mood disorders, like OCD, all these different kind of things that people can specialize in or have a certain angle to promote. And so I think once you realize maybe what your passion is, or what it is that you gravitate towards when you're seeing clients, and what issues or whatever you like to kind of work with, kind of being able to promote that and market yourself on social media. Obviously, social media is not therapy in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's not.
You can provide people with like helpful tips or just everyday kind of like coping skills, and maybe just more psychoeducation at the end of the day of things that can help the average person on a day-to-day basis function a little more optimally.
Yeah, and again, making it more of an open conversation, making it something that's like
destigmatizing,
you know, socially acceptable, which it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah. But now moving on to say like a more personal note as women, right? In whatever field we're going to go into, it's like if you are a woman that plans on having a family, like you have to think, how is that going to work with my career? Have you had these thoughts? Like, are you still like waiting for years to come until you think about that? Or what would your plan be?
I mean, I think it's always just a thought that has come into my mind throughout the years because it's just something that I think a lot of women naturally think about. They think about their futures, what's it going to look like, and different things like that. And from what I mean, I don't have children or I'm not married as of right now, so I can only speak hypothetically. But, you know, from what I've kind of understood about, you know, being in a private practice setting, is that it can probably be a little bit tricky at times because, you know, you're seeing clients a lot of times in the evenings after they're done work. Nobody wants therapy at 7 a.m.
No, definitely not.
So in that sense, there could be a little bit of like that struggle between work-life balance of, you know, the demand for when clients want therapy is in the evenings, but like if you also have a family or just you need your own, I guess, unwinding time, your own time of self-care after a long work day, you know, it can definitely seem like it could be a bit of a hard, I guess, a hard kind of thing to work through. But I think, you know, at the same time, being a therapist or being in a private practice, there is that flexibility where you have the option to work, you know, a couple days a week. Or you can choose if you work full-time, part-time. And, like, obviously it does depend on the practice that you're at. But a lot of clinicians will work at multiple different practices, like 1 or 2 times a week at, like, let's say 2 or 3 practices. So I think to some extent you can choose like just working at one private practice a couple days a week and then be able to create that like balance in a way.
It's like creating your own schedule at the end of the day. That's like one of the best parts about being so highly specialized in an area that at the end of the day, you know, you provide that skill set. And because you provide the skill set, it's like, okay, I can do this for you. I can do this for you at this time and this time and this time, but I can't do it at this time. So that's another reason to stay in school, kids, because, you know, you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to have that liberty, a little bit of control of your time at the end of the day. Yeah. Now, moving on to, like, more lighthearted manners, I did want to ask you certain things. Like, what is your favorite thing about your job versus your least favorite thing?
I think my favorite thing is seeing, like, working with clients right now and seeing them make progress. Like, to me, that it's a great feeling to see that someone is...
That's where the empathy comes out.
Is really, like, absorbing... what they're learning in therapy sessions, or is just making their own personal growth. And so kind of seeing a client at session 1 versus like session 15 and seeing like, wow, you've already made so much growth in these, let's say, like past couple months. It's honestly, it's a great feeling. And it's great for the clients for us to be able to point that out to them and show them like, you've made all that growth. And so. Yeah.
But see, that's like you being invested as like a person wanting to see someone improve and get better, and you definitely have to be able to have that inner empath in you, because at the end of the day, if you don't, if you're just in it for like, say, the money, if you're just in it for the prestige, like, honey, you're gonna be in it for a long time.
You're gonna burn out so fast. Even like having, and I think maybe that comes to the worst part or the most challenging part is like even being super passionate about what I'm doing and really loving what I'm doing and feeling like I'm in the right spot. It doesn't avoid the feelings of burnout. It's definitely very real. And, you know, like we're saying, therapy can be very draining at the end of the day, too, because, you know, I'm a human being, too, who's going through their own issues or feelings on a day-to-day basis.
It's like no one ever thinks of, like, you know, like when you're a kid, you don't think of your teacher as a person. But your therapist, you know, when you're in therapy, is also a person.
So it's like you have to really learn to set that aside before going into being in the therapist chair and putting on that hat. And so that can definitely be like something that's challenging at times. And, you know, like I said, having, let's say, multiple clients in one day can feel exhausting sometimes. Just, you know, it can feel like easier to get burnt out than maybe other times. But it's just something that I think you still have to like navigate as time goes on. Like, I'm definitely really fresh in this, so I'm still trying to figure out what works for me, what doesn't, and like knowing what self-care practices I need to put in place so that I don't burn out, so that I can remain, you know, a present
it's
therapist
a long-term
for someone.
System that works. That does make sense.
Got to practice what you preach.
No, 100%. And it's like, especially in this area of work, you don't want to we talked about it. You know, you got to be good with yourself in order to be good for other people. Yeah. So it's really putting your best foot forward. And I do sometimes believe it's like self-care doesn't mean being selfish, but it does mean taking time for yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I just go home after, like, say, like I've had like 4 8-hour days. I get it. It's like everyone works 8 hours, but you know what? Some days are harder than others. I have to just go to my room and like turn my phone off. I don't even sleep. Yes. Like my brain is still actively on. I can't sleep. So I just like lay there sometimes. I'm just in my bed in like the dark. I'm just like,
you just need to decompress sometimes and like have no mental energy being exuded. Like literally just nothing.
And it's like, I swear I feel the electricity in my brain sometimes. So like, what do you think are some self-care practices that like you practice yourself?
Personally for myself, and it's still something that's like a work in progress that I'm trying to kind of navigate myself. But I've always found that honestly being outside and in nature to me is so recentering and grounding. And so, I mean, it can be hard in Canada when it's cold and it's like not that pretty outside.
Like the snow and slush. See, everyone in Canada thinks that, you know, okay, we live in Canada, it's like snow, beautiful. No, we live in slush like 80% of the time. And slush looks so gross.
When it's like dreary weather.
Yeah. When was the last time we actually saw the sun? You know, not just a whole bunch of clouds.
Yeah, so that makes that a little bit more difficult. But on a daily basis, honestly, just getting like smelling the air, getting like fresh air into my lungs.
Those hot girl walks.
Those hot girl walks, they do something. And just taking that time, I think, for myself, you know, even just walking by myself, not speaking with anyone, but just trying to enjoy that walk.
Your neighbors say hi to you, I'm like, sorry, I'm on a hot girl walk.
Just like,
don't talk to me.
I'm just like, so definitely that, but even just like moving your body for myself, like doing a workout, even if I don't want to, it's like I always feel better after.
100%.
I always feel better after. So just like moving your body is so, and that's what like how we had talked about before, how it's like mind, body, soul, everything is all connected. And so those practices of even taking a 30-minute walk can have significant effects on your mental health in a positive way. And so really just trying to put that in place for myself and get my body moving, you know, let my brain rest a little bit and like carry on.
And I think as like a mini testimonial for myself is that after like a very long and enduring like lockdown after COVID, you know, it's like I had gone on this 4-month like staycation in Guatemala. That's where, you know, that's where I'm from. That's where I'm from, people. Okay. So being there, was like I was able to do online school, online work, and it was great. But it was also gratifying for myself to be able to, like, at the end of the day when I was done with stuff, you go out and everything there is much more like, you know, nature focused. You're outside. There's so much sun at all times.
The scenery too.
It was amazing. Honestly, just being able to breathe fresh air all the time and like being outside is like so beneficial. And literally, if you go to your doctor here, they're going to tell you, you need to be on a vitamin D supplement. Everybody needs to be on a vitamin D supplement because nobody's getting enough.
The real thing is so much better.
It's so much better. Oh my gosh. So get outside, but in Canada, I know it's hard.
If there's no sun, it's still like, there's still benefits.
There's fresh air.
Do your 30-minute walk. Walk your dog, walk with your sister, put on a podcast, whatever you gotta do.
Walk your little brother. I don't know, man. Whatever you
The options are endless.
Yes. No, I think it's obvious, but how would you describe yourself? As an introvert or an extrovert?
I mean, I think overall, an extrovert for sure. Like, I think for the most part, I do get my energy around being other people and thrive in those kind of environments. But I think the same time as I am getting older, I think, and maybe as I'm just like super busy, like this is a very busy season in my life where it feels like I don't have much spare time. I'm appreciating my alone time so much more.
I agree.
So much more. Like before, I think when I was younger, that alone time felt painful.
I know.
To just be by yourself. It's like, what do you do? I have no one to talk to. I have nothing to do. But now I'm just
like, am I a loser because I don't have plans right now?
It's like I couldn't just even go like 10 minutes being by myself, have to just go to my sister's room, see what's up with them, like just even being in other people's presence was very like comforting. But now I'm like, literally give me the alone time.
Truly. And it's like before I, like as a fellow extrovert, it's like I used to look at introverts and be like, how do you even operate? Like, how do you thrive? And now, like I told you, I need to disconnect. I need to find myself, like I don't want to talk. Even like sometimes expending that energy talking to people. It's like, well, I thrive. Getting energy from other people at the end of the day, I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want to talk to you.
Like, and it's like, if you don't have like much of a balance throughout your work days or you're working with people all day long, school all day long, whatever the case may be, it's like, I think that balance is so necessary. So I think maybe like in different seasons of life as time goes on and there's a bit of a like bigger, or it's a nicer balance, you know, I'll appreciate that social time more, but right now I'm just like, I need to disconnect.
Yeah, just have that me time. That's so great self-care.
Exactly.
But you mentioned your sisters, and I think one of the most interesting things, like, you have going on right now too, is the fact that on your Instagram account for psychology, you talk a lot about your birth order within, like, your siblings and stuff. And I find that fascinating. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit on that. Like,
so, kind of the Instagram account that I have going on right now, it's almost like a personal diary in a way of, like, the things I'm learning as I'm learning it. And so within my master's, we've done a lot of family systems theory work and understanding that certain modality in more depth. And so one of the tenets of that is kind of how birth order and within your family of origin that you grew up in, how that can affect you and how that can affect your personality as you get older, how it can affect your future relationships.
So if you're the firstborn, you're normal. If you're thirdborn, you're a psychopath.
Every, like, birth order has their kind of general characteristics. Obviously, it's not something like to say if you are the oldest, you will be like this. Yeah. But there's general characteristics that seem to be portrayed over and over in certain birth order positions. Just a lot on also, like, how your family kind of socializes each child and, what that role can mean, I guess, like, for you and your relationships in the future. So it's definitely an area that's interesting and has lots of information.
And it's like you mentioned, you don't have any brothers. Like, you have how many sisters?
Two younger sisters.
Right? So it's like your birth order tells you a lot about you and yourself as the first child. And it's like, I know it's stereotypical for the first child to be able to break, like, certain... well, maybe not break the barriers. That's probably the second child, I think, because I was a second child, broke a lot of barriers. I was a rebel. Yeah, sorry, Mom. But as a first child, you really have to live up to certain expectations sometimes. Yeah. You put the responsibility on yourself, and it's like you're, like, almost, like, second in charge after your parents. And it's like, oh, Jesus. It's so fun. It doesn't all look fun at all.
And so I think understanding those birth order positions in more depth and understanding where, like, certain traits of mine come from as the oldest, maybe, like, that sense of perfectionism, which is something that was hard for me to deal with throughout my undergraduate degree and even into my master's. Understanding where that come from those, pressures that just naturally end up getting put
that
onto
A-type personality just comes out.
Just can't help it. It's there. It's ready to come out.
Yeah.
So I think just learning more about those personality traits that I have been able to identify within myself as the oldest has been just helpful for me to even become more self-aware of that and understand where the heck it came from.
Yeah, I agree. I read it sometimes. I'm like, I'm so fascinated by this.
Yeah.
So I definitely, recommend this to everybody. Mindfully Micaela, like, go check it out. And, like, you're gonna be scrolling there for a while. And you're gonna be like, my gosh, this is why my brother is like this. Yeah. It makes so much sense now.
You may just end up diagnosing your family, even though that's not the purpose.
Yeah, it's not the point. You know, it's just a little self-reflection. Open up your mind. Be open-minded. That's what it's about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what time of day do you think you get your best work done? Like, as a university student or in your, like, placement?
I think for myself, my best work, honestly, it's a short window. But I think probably, like, 11 in the morning, like 11 a.m. to, like, 4 p.m.
Okay.
Honestly, the window is short. I feel like I'm not a morning person, but I'm not a night person.
Yeah.
Still to this day, I've never pulled an all-nighter. So it's like, that's
you went through your whole undergrad and you're your master's and you've never done an all-nighter.
I need 10 hours of sleep, and that's, like, not a lie.
10 hours of sleep. Oh,
that's
my gosh.
That's my own self-care.
Oh,
if I don't get that,
yeah, sure. Let's call it that. I feel like 10 hours is glorious, but I don't know. For me, 10 hours might be much. I don't know how you do 10 hours every single day.
8 to 10. I just need that sleep.
But it's optimal.
And then, just after dinner, things go downhill. It's like dinner really interrupts that workflow. Yeah. And then it's just like how do I get started again?
Yeah,
like, no. Okay. That's like my rest time.
We're closing our computers. We're turning off our phones. Okay. Yeah, but of course in psychology, if your clients reach out to you, you're like, shit.
Yeah, so we're still working on that. Yeah. You still got to do the evenings.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I'm just an afternoon girl through and through.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So, 11 to 3, it's like you're not too hungry, you're not too tired.
It's like middle of the day. I don't know. It's just, Feels
good
like a
vibes.
good vibe.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what I was going to ask you, where can listeners find you online? But I've already mentioned, Mindfully Micaela.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So that is, Mindfully Micaela is just an account I kind of started at the beginning of my master's to just kind of document my own self-growth. And so, you will probably find something on there that you can relate to. It's like a bunch of just random different things that I've learned over my time.
Yeah.
Things that have personally helped me. Things that have, I think, made an impact on my own growth. And so I just like to document those kind of things. And yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was also going to ask you, so not even as a psychologist, just personally, what are 3 books that you would recommend to other people? Or one.
3, yeah. Okay, so I do have one, and I recommend it to all my family and friends. Like, I am shoving this book on other people.
Okay.
So it's called What Happened to You, and I think the author is Bruce Perry. I think it's a conversation with Oprah, but it's surrounding childhood resilience and kind of addresses family trauma and how your childhood can have an impact on you, for the rest of your life, but on your adult relationships and just how you function on a day-to-day basis as you are now an adult. And so I think that book has been really eye-opening for me, and it's, I think, really eye-opening for a lot of people to kind of make those connections that, it's not like your childhood is your childhood and your adulthood is adulthood.
No, it's like all connected.
You can't separate one from the two, and how, there's a lot of things we maybe don't know that we need healing on, but the whole
truly
kind of the whole premise of the book is that it's kind of to approach people with a perspective of what happened to you rather than what's wrong with you. Yeah. And I really love that, because I think after reading this book and just understanding your own family in more detail, you realize, like, you can't ever say really what's wrong with you, because it's just like, it's always based on, the different events that you went through, the environment that you grew up in. And so it approaches it from a more compassionate lens for yourself and for, like, other people, I think, that you can kind of look at life in.
Because that title, like, What Happened to You, makes you think, I'm like, oh my gosh, is there something wrong with me? Yeah. Like, for me, okay, that's like a trigger. I should probably go see the with that, But, like, it does get you thinking. It's very captivating. Yeah. And it's something that's like, oh, okay, like, I don't know what happened to me, tell me. And then you go to the book, and you get to have that self-reflection through somebody else's process. Sometimes people thrive like that. So I do think that's, like, a great book recommendation. I'll take it down. I'll take your word on it, you know?
Because the thing is, like, what happened to you, we assume it's always, like, something bad, too. But it's, like, even the good things that your family did for you will have an impact on you now.
100%. Like, your love language is, like, based on how your parents express, like, care for you. That's something that I realized, it does affect, like, how.
Unfortunately, obviously, families aren't perfect. So a lot of times there is those things that maybe we wouldn't have, if we go back, we wouldn't do it that way. Yeah. But it's, I think, helpful to just kind of have that perspective. And it's been really eye-opening, I think.
Well, I thank you so much for your time today. And I feel like it's been a very eye-opening conversation for me. Jeez, there's a lot to think about. I'm going to go home now, turn off the lights.
There you go. Have your self-reflection time and just, like, stew over it.
Exactly. So thank you guys for joining us on the P Word. I hope you guys realize that on today's podcast, empathy is a strength that is found so rarely in our world. And putting yourselves first doesn't make you selfish, just like how seeking therapy doesn't make you weak. And I implore you guys, I'm not just asking, but try to be more introspective and touch base with yourselves more often than you usually would. Whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, we all start somewhere. And I hope you guys tune in next week for another amazing guest that you're not going to want to miss on the P Word. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below. See you guys later.